Go for a walk. Yeah. Should we go in the car? Go for a walk. Yeah. Should we go? Let's go for a walk. Yes. Come on.
It is windy up here. Come to a slightly different place today, just around the corner from where we live, but a different lake for the dogs to run around. Welcome to the return of Electric Tuesday. Now, I will at some point have a sting to slot into that little spot there, but I haven't got one yet. I can't think of what to do. If anyone's got any suggestions for a very quick 6-second sting for Electric Tuesdays, do let me know. But anyway, when you saw the title of this video, Flying F1 Cars, what were you thinking about? What did it first make you think of? Was it this? I believe I can fly. Was it this, perhaps? Or was it even this? I tell you what, I bet it wasn't this. Because whilst this may not be a flying F1 car, please don't shout at me for clickbait, because just bear with me, there is some truth in the title of this video. That may not be a flying Formula 1 car, but it is a flying taxi, and it's the brainchild, and not even just the brainchild, but it's a venture which has links, quite strong links to Formula 1. This is a company called Vertical Aerospace. Have developed a electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that they hope to use within a few years, I mean in the very, very foreseeable future, to be used as a manned air taxi intercity. So kind of has a range of about 500 miles at the moment. It's fully electric, it's a sort of quadcopter type device, 4 rotors. It will take 4 people. And it will be able to transport people very effectively, very efficiently and very quickly between long distance cities, probably in the same country. So for example, you could probably go from London to Scotland, let's say, London to Edinburgh, London to Newcastle, those kind of distances very quickly without the disaster that's always traffic that we always suffer with. So great idea, it sounds amazing, doesn't it? We'd all love to see it happen, I'm sure. But this is actually going to be a reality, and it is a venture that's been put together by a man called Stephen Fitzpatrick. You may or may not remember him from his time in Formula 1. He wasn't an overly prominent figure, but I think that was very deliberate on his part. But he did play a role, and he was the team owner of the Manor Formula 1 team for some time. Well, that was hilarious. It's like a massive dog play date. There are about 10 dogs in the end in that little scrap. Anyway, as I was saying, Stephen Fitzpatrick, one-time owner of Manor Formula 1 team before it had that disastrous ending, That was his taste into Formula One. He kind of dipped his toe in the water as a kind of investor. He had made a large fortune in the UK energy market. So he created a company called OVO Energy, which took on the big six energy providers in the UK, and is now a very successful company. And off the back of that, decided to get involved in Formula One. That's obviously, it didn't work out in a business sense. The company folded, went into administration, as we all know. So it wasn't a great ending to that little chapter of his story. But what he's done now is taken some of the things that he learned from Formula One, and Formula One's always a massive learning experience. No matter what your role in it is, it's a huge eye-opener. And I think that's what happened to him. He opened his eyes, and he's taken some of that and decided to put it into this new venture. And I think it's really, really interesting. I spoke to him very quickly yesterday, just via text messages, exchanged a few messages. I'm hoping that at some point I'll be able to go down, spend some time with him and see the aircraft itself, see the project, and give you a little bit more insight into it. But for now, I just thought I'd talk a little bit about how its links to Formula One have ended up creating this, what could be a really revolutionary and groundbreaking project. I think it's brilliant. What Stephen and his team are doing, and particularly Stephen from his time in Formula One, he's taking not so much some of the direct technical details of a Formula One car. One of the things that he pointed out, and I think this is really relevant and potentially, well, whether it's a problem or an issue or something that we should be thinking about in Formula One, Formula One in its current form, as opposed to Formula One of the previous kind of 20, 30, 40 years, is no longer really producing some of the high-tech developments that will then filter into the cars that we all drive on the road. And that is partly because the road car industry has actually kind of taken over. It's left Formula One behind in terms of most of its technology, certainly in terms of its drivetrain technology. We developed so many of the technologies that we now take for granted in our road cars through Formula One. Things like as simple as disc brakes started in racing, traction control, things like that. We're no longer producing innovations on that level to feed into the automotive industry anymore, because actually the automotive industry is actually way ahead of us in terms of some of the more relevant technological developments, particularly around EVs and the way they work. The biggest innovations in the road car industry right now are coming around software, around battery technology, around things like torque vectoring, where you can use hub motors, a motor in each corner of the vehicle, and then split the torque between those as and where it's required. And those kind of technologies, which make a car so much more efficient and actually make it drive and handle incredibly well, are not even a factor in Formula One anymore. So what is it we can take from Formula One to help the future of the road car industry and of the transportation industry as a whole? Well, Stephen Fitzpatrick and his team believe that things like materials science that he has taken from Formula One can play a huge role in the future transportation industry. Things like materials like carbon fibre, and beyond that, nano-based materials, things like graphene-based composites. Simulation, which is incredibly advanced in Formula One, can be a real benefit to the testing side of all of these new projects. He's taken all of those kind of areas that he's learnt from Formula One, things he's experienced, things he's seen working at the very top of their game, and started to apply those to this new vertical takeoff and landing aircraft project that he started. He's brought people in from the aerospace industry, from Formula One, from software companies and industries, all the top people from lots of these different areas and different sectors, to bring them together to create something that's brand new and revolutionary. I love revolutionary. One of the things that Stephen says, and this is common I think amongst lots of people who come along and disrupt an industry with innovations and revolutions, is that Stephen says that air travel, the model for air travel, hasn't really changed for a long time in terms of the distance that you're travelling. So basically the same model applies to whether you're travelling 500 miles or 5,000 miles. You get into an airport, you queue up at an airport, you check in, you go through that whole process, you board your aeroplane, which is for multiple passengers, take off at one of the major airports, fly to your destination and go through the same process again when you land. So if you're talking about the smaller end of that journey range, the sort of 400-500 mile range, the intercity range, why do we need to be going through that process? If we can develop a vehicle like he has done, which can take off vertically, so it doesn't need a major runway, if it can be efficient enough to not burn combustible fuels and pollute the atmosphere, if it can be cheap to run, if it can be lightweight, if it can be easy to fly, if it can be hassle-free, well then why isn't that just a great thing? Now, I'm sure you're all saying, well, we've heard this before. We've heard about Google and Boeing and even Uber developing unmanned electric drone-based taxi or transportation services, and they absolutely are. And this is one of the areas where I think Stephen has got this bit spot on in the short term. They are all developing unmanned flying drones that will be able to transport passengers, and that's great. And I'm sure, I've no doubt, that is where the industry will end up. Even Stephen says that is his longer term plan, that's what will happen to vertical aerospace. However, if you think about right now, that's such an over-regulated area. The minefield of regulations covering unmanned drones, even to talk about unmanned cars, it's incredibly over-regulated and very, very difficult to circumnavigate. So at the moment, in the short term, why not put a pilot in it? Why not put somebody at the controls? Which means you can get around a lot of that regulation. Of course, there's still regulation to overcome, but nowhere near as much. So if we're talking about a project which hopes to be online in just a small handful of years to come, this is a far more feasible project. So if our current version of Formula One has gone off in a different technical direction perhaps, or even if that technology is sometimes just too high spec to be applied to the challenges of a more typical road car that you and I might be driving on the road, even if that's happened, maybe that technology, maybe that high-end technology, those materials, even some of the processes that we've used and developed in Formula One, maybe they can be applied to the future of our transportation industry, and just maybe it might look something like this.